So, have you ever felt like you were promised something big, something really amazing, but, all you're seeing are just these tiny little breadcrumbs?
Definitely.
And you wonder, what if those crumbs aren't like a disappointment? What if they're actually the first signs of, I don't know, a feast coming your way?
That's a great way to put it.
It kind of reminds me, funny enough, of trying to predict the weather. I once glanced out, saw this single ray of sunshine and thought, okay, great, warm day.
Oh, no.
Yeah, totally soaked. Unexpected downpour like 10 minutes later. I completely missed the clues, the dark clouds gathering way off, the wind picking up.
The subtle signs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're so focused on wanting that grand, obvious answer that we miss the small whispers of what's actually happening.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today, this whole idea that small signs can actually point towards really big miracles. This is inspired by a powerful message that we'll link to in the show notes, so if you want to check that out, you can. And if you're finding these deep dives helpful, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes.
All right, sounds good. And our main guide for this is an amazing story from the Bible. It's in 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 41 through 46.
The classic.
Now, if you haven't heard the full message this deep dive is based on, that's okay, don't worry. We'll fill you in on the essentials. You got to picture this. Israel is in deep spiritual trouble under King Ahab.
Right. 1 Kings 16 paints a pretty bleak picture. Ahab, it says, did more evil than any king before him.
Yeah, he took idol worship, specifically Baal worship, to a whole new level. Built altars, Agera poles, essentially led the whole nation away from God.
And it wasn't just, a minor drift. This was pervasive. It was deeply entrenched idolatry, influencing everything, a real break from their cup.
Exactly, and the consequence, God sends the prophet Elijah with this really stark message. You find it in 1 Kings 17, verse 1, basically. No rain, not a drop, for 3.5 years.
Imagine that, in an agrarian society. A drought that long is. It's famine, it's suffering, total desperation.
It was a huge wake-up call. So then, fast forward to 1 Kings 18, we get this dramatic showdown on Mount Carmel. Elijah challenges the prophets of Baal.
The big contest. Fire from heaven.
Right. 2 altars, 2 prayers. Whichever God answers with fire, he's the real one. And, of course, God answers Elijah. Boom. Fire consumes the offering, the wood, the stones, the dust, even the water in the trench.
An undeniable display of power. The people see it. They fall on their faces. The Lord, He is God.
You'd think that'd be it. Right. Problem solved. But here's the interesting part. Even after that massive miracle, the rain doesn't just start falling. The drought isn't over yet.
The fire was step 1, but the restoration wasn't complete.
So Elijah doesn't just sit back. In verses 41 and 42, 1 Kings 18, he tells King Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain."
Which is fascinating, because audibly there wasn't any sound of rain yet, was there?
Not at all. But Elijah hears it, spiritually perhaps. Then he goes up Mount Carmel himself, gets down on the ground, puts his face between his knees, this posture of intense prayer.
He's praying specifically for that promised rain. The nation needs it desperately.
And he tells his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." The servant goes, looks, comes back, there is nothing. Elijah just says, "Go again." This happens 7 times. 6 times the servant goes, scans the horizon, comes back empty-handed. Nothing.
Imagine the servant. But think about Elijah's persistence. His unwavering faith, really. After seeing the fire, he knows God will send rain, even when there's zero visible evidence.
It could have been so discouraging, right? But he just keeps at it.
Which tells us a lot about faith, doesn't it? It's not always about immediate results.
Absolutely. It's believing even when you don't see. So, finally, the 7th time, the servant comes back with something different.
Just a little something.
Yeah, he says, "Look, a small cloud the size of a man's hand is rising from the sea." Think about that. After 3.5 years of drought, after fire from heaven, the first sign is this tiny, almost insignificant cloud.
Barely anything. You could almost dismiss it.
But Elijah doesn't, and this is crucial. He immediately recognizes this tiny cloud as God's answer. He doesn't scoff, doesn't say, "That's it."
No, he understands. It shows incredible spiritual discernment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
An attunement to how God works, which isn't always, the big flashy show.
Exactly right. He acts immediately. He tells his servant, "Go tell Ahab, harness your chariot, get down the mountain before the rain stops you." He saw the massive potential in that minuscule sign.
He knew it was the leading edge of the answer.
And what happens next? Verse 45. Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds, the wind rose, and there was a great downpour. The drought was broken. Just like that.
A life-altering miracle, all starting from something you could cover with your hand. Amazing.
So when we step back and look at this, what can we pull from it for our lives? Well, first, I think is just how vital it is to pay attention to the small signs. We often want the big neon sign, the undeniable proof, but maybe God is working more subtly, like those little opportunities, quiet nudges, things we might easily overlook.
Like your weather forecast mishap.
Exactly. I missed the small signs, paid the price. How often do we miss the start of something amazing because we're just not tuned into the details?
And it makes me think, how often do we miss these small signs in our own lives? We're so focused on the big breakthroughs, the dramatic changes, that we overlook the small opportunities, those quiet nudges that God might be using to guide us.
It's easy to get caught up in what we think things should look like, that we miss what's actually happening right in front of us.
It's so true. So I have to ask you, could it be that a miracle is already starting in your life right now, but it's so small, so subtle, that you're just not seeing it yet? Maybe it's a new idea that's popped into your head. Maybe it's a chance meeting with someone. Maybe it's just a feeling deep down that you can't shake. Don't dismiss these things. Pay attention. You never know what they might lead to.
We need to be open to God working in all sorts of ways, not just the ways we expect or find easy to understand.
Exactly.
God's voice isn't always a shout. Sometimes it's more like a whisper.
It really calls for cultivating a kind of spiritual sensitivity, doesn't it? An awareness of God's leading, not just in the spectacular, but in the ordinary too. Being present, listening.
Yeah, definitely. And the second big thing, I think, is the power of remembering what God has already done.
Yes, crucial.
Elijah had just seen fire fall from heaven. That memory, that fresh experience of God's power, surely it fueled his faith while he waited for the rain, right? While his servant kept coming back with nothing.
Absolutely. It provides an anchor.
We're human, we forget easily, especially when facing something new or waiting a long time. Psalm 103 verse 2 says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits."
Remembering builds trust.
Intentionally looking back at times, big or small, when God came through, it builds this foundation, this confidence we can stand on when all we see right now is that tiny cloud.
It shifts our perspective from the current lack to past faithfulness.
And that brings us to the third key thing, trusting God's timing and, importantly, acting in faith.
Patience in action.
Elijah didn't quit after try number 1 or 2 or 6. He kept praying, kept sending the servant. Persistence, patience, trusting God's timing, which is rarely our own, let's be honest.
That's true.
But then when he did get that small sign, he didn't just sit back and wait some more. He acted, immediately told Ahab to get moving.
That's key. The sign prompted action.
So for us, it means being patient, yes, trusting the process even when things seem slow or small, but also being ready. When we recognize even those little indicators, we need to be prepared to act in faith, just like Elijah.
Faith isn't passive waiting necessarily, it's active trust. And it's not about needing all the answers or seeing the whole picture. It's trusting God's character, his promises, his wisdom, even with minimal evidence. Elijah's faith wasn't in the cloud size, it was in the God who sent it.
Well said.
Yeah. So to wrap this all up, let's revisit those key takeaways. First, don't ignore those small signs. They may seem insignificant at first, but they could be the starting point of something truly amazing.
Right. And remember, God has a track record of faithfulness in your life. He's shown up for you before, and he'll do it again.
He will. And finally, trust his timing. Delays don't mean denials. God working behind the scenes, even when we can't see it.
It's about holding on to hope, even when things seem uncertain.
And being willing to be surprised by how God chooses to work in our lives. Remember Psalm 46, verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God."
Sometimes the best thing we can do is quiet our minds, let go of our anxieties, and just rest in his presence.
Exactly. And as John chapter 14, verse 13 says, we can ask for anything in his name and he will do it.
So keep praying, keep seeking, and keep trusting.
Because you never know what amazing things God might be doing in your life right now, starting from the smallest of beginnings.
I love that. It's such an encouraging reminder that God is always at work. And even the smallest cloud can be a sign of his great power and faithfulness. So maybe just a final thought for everyone listening. As you go through your day, your week, could the very thing you might be overlooking right now, that seemingly insignificant detail, that quiet prompting in your spirit, could that be the small sign, the beginning of your next big breakthrough?
It's a challenging thought.
Be still, pay attention, remember God's faithfulness in your own story, and trust his perfect timing. If this deep dive into, well, the power of small beginnings has resonated with you, and maybe you want to explore the full message this conversation draws from, we really encourage you to subscribe to our channel. We do more explorations like this all the time.
Yeah, definitely check out the full message if you can.
The link to that is right there in the description below. And we'll be back soon with another deep dive into, well, another fascinating topic. So stay tuned for that.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks so much for joining us today.